Hi, good morning, and welcome to all. I'm Julio Capot Jr., and I'm the Deputy Director of the Wilsonian Public Humanities Lab at FIU. Welcome to today's episode. It's episode 4 of our season 2 of Coffee and Conversations, Museum and Histories of Anti-Blackness. We began just a little bit about how we started all of this. We began this project at the start of the coronavirus pandemic and quarantine some months ago, and it feels like years ago as I think about quarantine, in order to understand how cultural institutions were handling the changes before us at the time and certainly now, thinking ahead. The pandemic, however, of course, is not at all isolated. Rather, we continue, of course, to see the calls against anti-Black violence. We also acknowledge that these are overlapping pandemics of today, deeply rooted in the past. With this very much in mind, so we're going to emphasize the significance of centering Black lives and experiences in museums and cultural institutions, and the challenges of working against the powers at institutions and the field of public history or society more generally, of course, that have historically sought to erase, to marginalize, or to whitewash Black histories and experiences. So today I have the great honor and pleasure, I can't stress that enough, to be in conversation with Regina Gale Phillips, the Executive Director of the Lincolnville Museum and Cultural Center in St. Augustine, Florida, which I was hoping to visit this summer, but of course with Corona, I'm unable to do so. Thanks for being here, Regina Gale.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Just very briefly, let me sum up our format for our audience. We'll talk for about 20 minutes and then we'll take a few questions from everyone for the remaining 10 minutes or so. At any time though, please just submit a question. It's in the bottom of your screen and we'll get to that at the end part of the episode. So welcome again. First, I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit about the Lincolnville Museum and Cultural Center, its history, including the Excelsior School building, which is such a powerfully gorgeous building, I think, in a lot of ways. It's architecture. And tell us about the work you do there.
Okay, great. Well, the museum actually started as the Excelsior Museum and Cultural Center. I guess about 2007 is when it opened originally. But the Excelsior actually is the first high school for African Americans in St. Johns County. So it was built, completed in 1925. So we're coming up on a 100-year anniversary. We're actually in the process of doing renovations. And it's not a clear preservation building because the building's been, altered through the years, but we are in the process of doing renovations to it and preservation based on a National Park Service grant that is just getting underway. So, but what has happened is that school is in a community that actually comes out of post-Civil War U.S. colored troops coming back to St. Augustine. And that area was offered as a place where they could lease property. They eventually buy property, build home sites. So it grew up in first during the Reconstruction period. There were a lot of Blacks who were elected from that community who were former soldiers who came back, who were elected to public office. And then eventually during the period of Jim Crow, it became kind of like a mecca for Blacks who are now, because of segregation, being kind of herded into certain areas of town. But they used that and turned it into a thriving community at that time. And then during the 60s, Lincolnville became an area where the civil rights movement was very much important. Dr. King came there, spent time leading some marches. Andrew Young came to St. Augustine, was nearly killed there. C.T. Vivian, who just passed away, and participated in the wait-ins there. So it has a very rich civil rights history. And so those are some of the things that we cover, but that's just a tiny spectrum of it. St. Augustine and the Lincolnville Museum is unique in that it covers 450 plus years of African presence here in America. And I get a pushback a lot of times when I say that because, we love the 1619 Project and the narrative that it brings, but our narrative predates that. And I've had that conversation with many people on the national level, and it's always, well, yeah, but we're talking about the English version of American history. But St. Augustine had Africans habitating here when the first Spaniards came and the French came. They were living among Native Americans. I think a lot more of that history is being brought out. That's an area that we actually worked with one of your professors who's working on that project that we were hoping to get an exhibit with. We will have to keep trying. Our funding didn't come through. With Dr. Michael Francis, who is well, I'm sorry, he's at FAU in Southwest Florida. But that's a project we've worked on. But some of the other things that we are doing is we cover that. We cover the good, happy stories about Lincolnville during its heyday. So you're going to hear about the success stories of people like Frank Butler. You're going to hear a little bit about Fort Mose, which is our first free Black settlement in America. And you're going to hear about the role that the different churches, historical churches, played leading up to the civil rights movement. So you get a little bit of all of that. You're going to get stories about the early conquistadors who came and went on expeditions throughout, not just Florida, but other parts of Central America. And so we play up some of those stories and also the ones who were in the Caribbean as well.
It's amazing. You all do so much. I spent a lot of time on your website, which is incredible. And there's so much so many great resources for teaching, and it's really, really great. Thank you for that. My next question is about coronavirus. How have things at Lincolnville Museum and Cultural Center changed since March? And how can our audiences best support you all during this time of uncertainty, not just for all cultural institutions and certainly beyond?
Yeah, well, a big part of what we do, since we are still pretty much an independent nonprofit institution, we do a lot of fundraising, which all nonprofits have to do just to stay alive. So we introduce culture in terms of jazz programming as a part of our cultural offerings as well as our fundraising. So we were in the middle of our major jazz series, which goes January through May. And in March, we had to shut it down halfway through. So that was a major thing that was interrupted. And, we have a following of people locally who love the jazz. We get local, regional, some occasionally a national artist. And we also have another program that we've been doing the last few years, which is called Living Legends, where we honor people in the community that have made contributions, like, Mrs. Vickers, Barbara Vickers, who there's a monument in our plaza about the foot soldiers. She was very instrumental in getting that erected there, but she was one of those young people during the 1960s. She's 90 something now, still living in our community, but who was courageous enough to go out and hit the streets and do sit-ins in churches that were also segregated at the time. And so we do that program on an ongoing basis. So we've had to put stuff like that on hold because we can't have people in the museum. At this point, we can't have crowds. We haven't been able to participate in a lot of the group tours that we were doing with school groups. So we've had to rethink how we present our museum. And we're just getting started only because we have such a small staff. I have myself and basically one other person. We have a lot of volunteers, but most of the volunteers are seniors and they don't really want to come out, and I can understand that. So we have a few really dedicated volunteers with good skills who've been working with us, and we've been putting together virtual tours, which we hope. Our first one is almost complete. It's going to be on Frank Butler, which is a more in-depth story about Frank Butler, who was the person that the Black Beach here in St. Augustine is named after. The traditional beach is now part of our county park system, but Frank Butler was a business person. He was also instrumental in helping to raise funds when the school where our museum is housed, the Excelsior building, was built, and he was head of the Black Businessmen Association and several different things. He helped to develop an area called College Park, which was near where Florida Normal College was, which became Florida Normal, which is now Florida Memorial, that's in Opelika there in Miami. And so those are the kinds of things that we're having to resort to one of the things that people could do to help, obviously, is we still, because all those programs were cut out, we still have to have funding in order to stay relevant. And we are still collecting information, believe it or not. So people are still sharing documents from history that they have with us. They're sharing other artwork that is relevant to our mission that we will be able to at some point do an exhibit on, and sharing their stories in ways that they may not have been led to do before.
That's great to hear. It sounds like I can't wait to see that exhibition too. That's incredible. So for everyone listening, visit the website and support such an important part of this process.
Right, and we are actually, the website is transitioning. So hopefully if you have issues in the next couple of days, please come back, because we are doing some transitioning there as well. And it's a little challenging when you don't have a big IT staff to help with all that stuff.
We get it. We understand. Same thing. Keep on trying. We all keep on trying. So if it doesn't work at the moment, you continue. As we discussed the twinning pandemics, so this notion, longstanding anti-Black violence and structural inequalities that have as of late taken distinct form really through the coronavirus. We see kind of coronavirus as a manifestation of these things, right? With the disproportionate number of people affected who are Black and brown and indigenous, for example. What role do you see for cultural institutions like Lincolnville, no doubt, but in the fight for Black liberation and social justice? What role is the museum in all of this?
Well, the number one role, I think, is to educate. And I think that that's what we all have to do. We have to put what's happening now into context of what it means to the timeline of Black history, or whatever your museum happens to be covering. The episode that kind of triggered a lot of this with George Floyd was the morning I woke up and saw it almost in real time. It was just like earth-shattering to me, because I've been working for the last couple of years on a community remembrance project for putting a lynching marker for Isaac Barrett in our plaza, and the city had approved it. And we were just waiting for, our final, designation and say, okay, it's good, you can install it now. And so I've been, studying that whole era of lynching in America very closely. And it was like watching a lynching in real time on TV, which I didn't think in 2020 we would see that way because of the callousness. So it was reminding me of all those, photographs, from the book Without Sanctuary, and all those pictures in your mind from the stories that you've read and heard about people playing out in real time. And I think that's what shocked America and shocked the world, to be honest with you. So it gives us an opportunity now to tell those stories in real time in ways that we've been doing it all the time, but we've had limited audiences. So now the audience is much broader. Hopefully the interest is much deeper. But the challenge to that is that everybody now is telling a story in their own ways, whether they have all the facts or not. That it's like, because we live in an instant kind of society, it's easy for somebody to post a picture of something and, to get a like or a share or whatever. And so if you do something a little more in depth, it makes it a little more challenging still to get that audience share, to get that information out there. The other part of it is that there are a lot of people who have the bandwidth, so to speak, to get the stories out there in an in-depth way, but some of them are doing it for commercial reasons. And that's the other thing, that we have to guard against. But our biggest challenge is to make sure that we're, first of all, able to stay afloat and do what we do. So, collaborating with others who are doing the same thing is one way of doing it. Doing things using the skills of young people like interns. We were discussing offset a little bit, who can help us with some of the research. We've partnered with some of the institutions of higher learning in our region And so we've got a couple of programs going on with them to help us to build a better archive of what we do. So it will be searchable. So one program that we have that's coming up that has not yet gotten final approval. I mean, we'll do it hopefully some way or another. Is building an Omeka site that will be searchable for our museum. But we've also worked, and that's with the University of North Florida, which is here in Jacksonville. The other one is a project we're hoping to get some funding from for the Love Florida program, which talks about the 450 years of African American presence here in St. Augustine, and have that as an interactive exhibit in our museum. Well, we didn't get funding this year, but we'll keep trying. And that's with the University, the Florida FAU in South Florida. And so with Dr. Michael Francis. I'm sorry, I'm having what they call it, Corona brain, COVID brain, a little brain fog here. I'm sorry.
The last 6 months before Corona.
Yeah.
No, our friends at FAU are doing incredible work.
Yeah.
Happy to hear that you're all collaborating and doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
But there are great opportunities that are out here. I think you just have to step out and, reach out to people and find ways you can work together on projects.
That's right. So much of it really is just putting all these great ideas together, because there's limited resources and so much good work and ideas, and a lot of it is just facilitating those conversations so that people tap into them, right? So that that's great to hear that you've named so many great institutions who are doing this already, just in the area and beyond, in parts of Southern Florida too. There's so many great connections.
Yeah.
In some ways, right, as Lincolnville, as a cultural institution that's dedicated to highlighting, commemorating, and celebrating Black life and experience, Lincolnville's already doing this important and necessary work. But I wonder if you have some insight, on your expertise and experiences as director here, about how other museums and cultural institutions that have historically erased and marginalized Black experiences and histories, that haven't been dedicated to talking about those experiences, how can they go about changing those practices and acknowledging those the histories of erasure and violence, right. And what. It's a tough, but it's such an important.
It's tough, and I'm glad you asked that, because we had the opportunity a few weeks ago to present to. We have a local archive society, and it's just kind of a loose leaf organization of archivists and museum directors, and how can we do in terms of like sharing ideas on best practices and so forth. So a lot of the institutions here have omitted the Black history segment of their program. So we have had conversations, and I think they've been open to doing things. We just met a couple of days ago about doing a collaborative for next year that will tie emancipation and Juneteenth with a series of programs, perhaps starting from January, which is our Emancipation Day here in St. Augustine, was January 1st, 1863. And which we have, on exhibit, as well as we've done heritage, reenactment programs here at the museum. But that a lot of other institutions, including like our Fort Castile, that they have, which is part of the National Park Service. That was the fort where the Union Army came in and took over during the Civil War. We have some other historical houses that can tell stories that they've omitted. For example, one house might say, oh, well, we had servants that did this. So, we bring to their attention they were servants, but they weren't paid servants. They were enslaved people. So now that they can tell that story in a way that they interpret it, so it gives that period of history that tells it the way it was. And also even bring in some of the stories of other indigenous groups into it that a lot of people don't want to talk about, the Seminole Wars that were very much a part of St. Augustine history and Florida history. And even the Trail of Tears, that those people were incarcerated here at our Fort Castile before the Trail of Tears had started here. And that there was, this young Black warrior named John Horse that was a part of that group. You go there and you don't hear that. So they have committed to trying to tell more inclusive stories. And I think that's a great start for what we have to do, that it's not a one-on kind of thing. It's not going to be, they can't tell our story, my story, because they're not the African American Museum, but they could tell their story so that it's more inclusive and more accurate in terms of what was really happening during that time period. And I think that if we all do that, then, it's like what our museum becomes is kind of like, okay, this is where you come to get the comprehensive story. And then I can say, well, if you go to that part in the city, you're going to get a little more detail and see maybe a living example of how this happened. Or if you go over there, and that's the kind of community museum and history preservation I would like to see in a city that's as old as St. Augustine, that has so many stories to tell. Some of the stories are, they're wonderful. We have some wonderful historians here who look at different aspects of history. But I think to have more people coming on board saying, we want to be a part of this. We want to be able to say, this is our contribution to this broader story. Because you have Hispanics here who are curators. I haven't met any Native American people here yet, but you've got people from all walks of life who are here. And even in the museum industry as a whole, talking to people from on a different level in terms of museum management, how do we make that more inclusive in terms of, making it look more equitable in terms of who's the leadership that, not just museums, but other nonprofits as well. What does the leadership look like? And bringing more young people in that, are from different diverse backgrounds that can share a different perspective. Because I can tell you, I have a young woman working with me. She's 20 something. She's an African American woman, but her perspective is different from mine. She has lived in a different time zone from where, you know what I mean? So, we share ideas, and hopefully I can learn from her and she can learn from me. And that, we put that together, and that's what I think will help the whole industry. In Florida, we're lucky to have a network of African American museums, which is called the Florida African American Historic Preservation Network. That organization has some issues right now because of not total defunding, but decreased funding from the state of Florida. And it's helped us, I know, as a small museum with some, stipend funds for interns that we've been able to use. It's helped us with reimbursements for some capacity building things. And so that's a thing that we have tapped into that has helped a lot of small museums, I know, in the state of Florida, and other states are starting to copy that pattern in terms of what they're doing with their museums, because we can't all be Smithsonian affiliates, or we can't all have American Association of Museum, partnerships, because that's a process. It's long, and it's a lot of criteria that you have to meet in order to get to that. But I think we can work at doing the best that we can, sharing those ideas with each other and sharing them in the communities where our museums are located with other museums that may be doing a different kind of history.
My goodness, you touched on everything I wanted and needed to hear. Thank you so much. I mean, it's one of those things too, where museums that have these different affiliations or don't have the affiliations like this, also provide a great space for us to do different types of things that otherwise under criteria would not be able to take form or to take shape. Thank you so much for that. I feel like, goodness, I got so much out of that. Any last thoughts before I open it up to Q&A? Any last things you'd want to add before?
The only thing, you should never ask me that.
Oh no, I could just all day.
Two things. One is, I already stressed the need for collaborations. The other is that, I'm working with local museums, hopefully to get the word out on a national basis about our unique St. Augustine story of having 450 years of African American presence, because I think it does a lot to the psyche of a young Black person to know that when Ponce de Leon came to Florida, that there was a Black man that was with him who had been to Florida prior to that. So when he stepped foot on at the Fountain of Youth here, that there was another man named Juan Garrido who was there before him and also supported him when he was ill and helped him to get back to Puerto Rico. So that's one part of what I push for that I really don't want to lose sight of. And the other is to say to all museum directors to be vigilant and people in this industry, especially small African American museums, that you're not allowing others to come in and exploit your history for dollars, because there's a lot of that going on right now.
I'm sure that, I mean, especially in the last, certainly this is something that's not new, but I worry that this is something that will only become a larger problem. Thank you so much thank you for all of that. We have a few questions. I'd love to, Rebecca Friedman, our director at WPHL, says, thank you so much for joining us today. So wonderful to have you. Your work is just incredible. Do you imagine the changes, she said, we'll all see here for a sustained period of time? Or do you imagine the focus on social justice and anti-racism with broader audiences might actually bring systemic change? Is this a transformative moment, she asks?
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I mean, we've been in conversations with a group locally here talking about anti-racism now for at least a year and a half, 2 years. And we get some city officials who come to the table. We get a lot of, leadership from the religious community, but we get people who are from all walks of life. It's not just, Christian, but it's Jewish people, religious people, people from Baha'i faith. We get some young people, and it's an informal kind of thing. We've been doing it for Tuesdays for one of the local pastors has hosted it. And we've talked about it. And it began around the conversation about the Confederate monument in our plaza. And so we use a program called Visions International, which helps you to structure how, the conversations go. So it's not just everybody just talking about whatever pops up, but to do it in a constructive way. And I think we've seen progress as a result of that. And I hope we'll continue to see progress that, people, once they realize that they're, people say, well, I'm not racist. And I like to say, well, I follow it, the thought that, if you're not being anti-racist, then, you're not really, it's not enough to say I'm not racist. So being anti-racist requires action. It requires some serious thought into where you are in it. So I see more things like that starting to happen, other groups coming up, and I'm hoping that we will continue to have those hard conversations, because they are hard. And, but I think if we're introflective and, in terms of how we feel, some of the things that we brought along with us from childhood, and it doesn't matter what your background is, you brought something with you, and how you've dealt with it, how you've overcome that, how you've used those negative emotions and turned them into something positive. I think that's what we talk about. And I think people will continue to do that. At least the conversations are starting. And I'm hopeful it'll be long-term.
Thank you so much. We have time for, it looks more like a comment, and that it's from, and then a question, and then we have to wrap up. Goodness, I really feel like I could talk to you for, thank you so much. What a great way to start. Well, it's not the start of the morning, but what a great way to end, it gives you fuel for the rest of the day. So this is from Susan Gladstone, our dear friend and the executive director of the Jewish Museum of Florida in South Beach. She says, we are creating a series of virtual programs called Black Lives in a Jewish Context. One of our programs will be about a Jewish man Abel Maripol, who wrote Strange Fruit. She's so interested to learn more about your jazz series and your possible participation at the Jewish Museum. Such talk about points of collaboration, and this is fabulous. And then a last question as we wrap up here from Trish. What can everyday folks do to help bring more attention to these issues as far as funding and the vocalization from the state goes? That's what Trish asked.
Right. Well, if you know a representative, an elected representative, then, reach out to them, stress to them the importance of the work we do here. I can tell you that we got as close as we've ever gotten this year to an appropriation from the state of Florida in a building, by the way, that's owned by the state of Florida, that they spend $0 on maintaining. All the everything has to come through us. And so we were vetoed by our governor, who decided to do something else with the money, which I won't go into. But I know we're in the middle of a pandemic. But I would say just reach out, and if you can, reach in and write a check or do a PayPal or whatever. We still need that, and we need people who have experiences, especially in this area. They have maybe skills that they will want to offer us in terms of volunteer service. We like that too, and we accept and appreciate that as well.
My goodness. Thank you so much. So everyone, please be sure to visit the website if it's not up right now, to keep trying as they continue to update it. And it's a fabulous site. So it's and there are opportunities there to donate and to support. Thank you so much, Regina Gale Phillips. This means everything to us, and yeah, I can't wait to continue the conversation and other forms of collaboration and work. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me, and continued success with this program. I think it brings a lot of good conversations to the table that we all need to continue having.
Thank you. And to our audience, we're taking a brief hiatus after months of doing this, and we'll pick right back up in a few weeks with the beginning of the new semester, which will largely be remote. So this continues to work for us this way. Thank you for joining us today, and for your continued participation and engagement with these really important questions. Thank you again, Regina Gale Phillips. Thank you.
Thanks.